Remember when a single woman with zero interest in settling down walked into a Minneapolis newsroom and changed everything? Well, from 1970 to 1977 on CBS, the Mary Tyler Moore Show turned a local TV newsroom into the most beloved workspace on television. Mary Tyler Moore, Ed Asner, Valerie Harper, Ted Knight, Cloris Leachman, Gavin MacLeod, and Betty White made WJM-TV feel like a place you'd actually want to clock into, even with Ted Baxter reading the news and Lou Grant on his third scotch by noon. But behind the sharp writing and perfect timing, there are stories that most people never heard, and some of them are wilder than anything the writers put on screen. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And stick around for number 2, because Ed Asner almost lost the role that defined his career. And number 1, well, it connects the show to one of the biggest animated empires in television history. Before we get started, hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps these retro deep dives coming every week. All right, let's head into the newsroom. Number 15, the episode that made America laugh at a funeral. In 1975, the Mary Tyler Moore Show did something that no sitcom had any business attempting. It took the audience to a funeral and made them laugh so hard they forgot to feel guilty about it. Chuckles Bites the Dust is still one of the greatest half hours in television history. A children's clown named Chuckles dies after being shelled by an elephant because he showed up to a parade dressed as Peter Peanut. The real-life inspiration was somehow stranger. A writer had read a news story about a man who suffocated after putting a stewed tomato can over his own head. The detail that grabbed them wasn't the accident, it was the funeral. The man's co-workers reportedly couldn't stop laughing during the service. Not out of cruelty, just sheer uncomfortable absurdity. David Lloyd took that kernel and built an entire episode around it. Joan Darling had to convince Moore to do it at all. A few days into rehearsal, Moore stopped cold and said a sitcom shouldn't be mining death for laughs. Darling told her that if Mary Richards went through it on screen, a lot of people would feel a lot better about themselves. Moore said, "All right, let's go to work." David Lloyd won the Emmy for writing. Joan Darling earned her first Emmy nomination for directing it. 50 years later, a clown in a peanut costume is still the gold standard for sitcom comedy. Number 14, the pilot from hell that almost killed the show. The very first taping of the Mary Tyler Moore Show was a disaster. It starts with a bomb threat on the studio lot.
Of the show, which was a disaster. Nothing got a laugh. We had Ethel reminded me later, that day there had been a bomb threat at the studio.
Now, the threat turned out to be nothing, but the audience had to be herded in after the all clear. It's not exactly the energy you want for a comedy debut. Then, the air conditioning died. 200 audience members and the entire cast left sweltering in 90-degree heat, delivering punchlines while sweating through their costumes. And if that wasn't enough, the cameras were twice as bulky as standard equipment, so the audience couldn't even see the actors over them. They had to watch the whole thing on small monitors, squinting at a comedy that was supposed to feel alive. The audience response matched. Test viewers called Mary Richards a, quote, loser. Why was she 30 and still single? They found Phyllis abrasive, and they saved the worst for Rhoda. Too New York, too aggressive, too mean. 3 days later, they reshot the pilot. And it worked. But the Rhoda problem needed a specific fix. The solution was to introduce Phyllis's young daughter, Bess, and give her one job: adore Rhoda. The line they added was simple. Bess liked Rhoda, quote, even though mom hates her. If this warm, innocent kid loved Rhoda, the audience would follow. And they did. Rhoda went from the most disliked character in the first taping to a breakout star, and eventually spun off into her own hit show. Number 13, Mary Richards was almost a divorcee, but CBS had a meltdown. Mary Richards wasn't supposed to be single. When creators James L. Brooks and Alan Burns first built the show, Mary was a divorcee, a woman in her 30s starting over in Minneapolis. For 1970, no sitcom ever put a divorced woman at the center of the story. Then, CBS heard the pitch, and the executives, they lost it. Alan Burns later recalled the network's response almost word for word. CBS told them that American audiences wouldn't tolerate 4 things on television: people from New York, divorce, Jews, and mustaches. That was the research. The mustaches alone should tell you everything you need to know about 1970 network television. But the divorce wasn't even the biggest problem. To millions of viewers, Moore was still Laura, the perfect wife from the Dick Van Dyke Show. CBS was terrified that audiences would assume Laura had divorced Rob. In 1970, that was treated like a ratings death sentence. So the divorce went away. Mary Richards became a woman who spent years helping a medical student named Bill get through school, and when he got his degree, he left. He eventually came back and asked her to move home, not as his wife, but as his mistress. She said no. That forced compromise is exactly what made the character matter. A divorced Mary Richards would have been recovering from something. The version CBS demanded was something television had never seen. A woman who made a clear-eyed choice, landed her own apartment and her own career, and had zero interest in being defined by whether or not she had a husband. CBS thought that they were protecting the show, but they accidentally made it better. Number 12, the finale hug that nobody planned. When the Mary Tyler Moore Show aired its finale, the writers wanted it to hurt. The premise was equal parts punchline and gut punch. The entire WJM newsroom gets fired, except Ted Baxter. The most incompetent man in local news keeps his job, while everyone else cleans out their desks. The group hug was in the script, but what happened next wasn't. Brooke stopped the room and asked if there was a funnier way out of the embrace than just breaking it apart. Georgia Engel had the answer. Well, there's Kleenex on the desk. We can go for the Kleenex. And so they did, staying locked together, shuffling sideways like one giant six-headed creature across the newsroom floor, and Brooks told them to keep it. Go for it. Go for it.
A physical joke about, they're all crying, and they said, who has a tissue? And the tissue box was on a desk, and they're all in this mass hugging each other, and instead of one person getting it, the clump moves over, and it's sort of like a famous joke now.
Earlier in the episode, Ted had quoted the old World War I marching song during his final newscast, an offhand Ted Baxter way of saying goodbye. In the final scene, Lou picks it up and starts singing it himself, turning Ted's blunder into something genuine. One by one, the group joins in. They walk out arm in arm, and the newsroom empties. Mary lingers behind. One last look, and she turns off the lights, closes the door, and walks out. That ending became the template for how a sitcom says goodbye. Number 11, the line that quietly changed what TV could say. In 1972, the Mary Tyler Moore Show slipped something past the entire country, and most people didn't even realize what they just heard. In a season 3 episode called You've Got a Friend, Mary's parents are visiting her apartment. Her mother casually calls out, "Don't forget to take your pill," and both Mary and her father respond, "I won't." The genius is in the ambiguity. Her mother could be reminding her husband about his medication, but the fact that Mary answers too tells you everything you need to know. Now, that line is widely believed to be the first time a sitcom ever referenced the birth control pill, and the way that they handled it is what made it matter. They treated it like brushing your teeth, routine, completely unremarkable, which in 1972 was the most remarkable thing that they could have done. The writers were strategic about it. They made sure it was Mary, not Rhoda, who delivered the moment. Mary Richards was the safe one, the sweet, responsible Midwestern professional. Writer Treva Silverman later explained it perfectly. Mary gave the idea a stamp of approval. She made it okay for audiences to accept that a single professional woman could have a private life and not be judged for it. Number 10, the secret wig that hid Mary's past. Now, when the Mary Tyler Moore Show debuted in 1970, Mary Tyler Moore walked onto that set wearing a wig the entire first season, and most viewers had no idea. It was Moore's own decision. Laura was her role of the past, and she wanted audiences to see a completely new character. As she later explained, the only thing that she could think of as to make Mary Richards feel separate from Laura was to change her hair. She wore what she called a fall, a half wig attached to the back of her head that gave her a longer, more modern look. Her real bangs stayed in front, blended so the whole thing looked natural. And it worked, but Moore couldn't stand wearing it. She said she was never able to relax. She couldn't turn her head comfortably, so the second audiences accepted Mary Richards as her own character, she got rid of it. Season 2 rolled around, and she had shorter hair, different silhouette. Even the color was noticeably lighter. Does anyone on the show acknowledge it? Ha, yeah, right, not a word. Classic 70s television. If you don't mention it, it didn't happen. Number 9, the day the entire set went silent. During a photo shoot for the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the cast was posing for still shots when the photographer, someone who had been with the show since its very first season, turned to John Amos, who played weatherman Gordie Howard, and said, "John, smile so we can see your teeth and we can know who you are." The entire room went quiet. Cast, crew, everyone stopped cold. No yelling, no confrontation, just unified silence that made one thing clear. That is not going to fly on this set. The next day, the photographer was gone. Never came back. He'd been part of the production from the beginning, and they still let him go anyway. Amos said later that creators Burns and Brooks never pandered to stereotypes or cheap humor, and that the set felt like a real meaningful ensemble. For the first time in his career, he felt like part of the team, and it showed on screen. Gordie Howard wasn't a stereotype or a punchline. He was a professional. His role had been described as arguably the first time an African-American performer was part of a comedic ensemble completely free of stereotypical characterization. Number 8, the dinner that set the tone for 7 seasons. Cloris Leachman and Gavin MacLeod had history before the Mary Tyler Moore Show ever existed, and Leachman made sure that everyone knew about it on day 1. In the mid-60s, the two worked together on a western called The Road West. MacLeod's character had to slap Leachman's, standard TV choreography. At least that's how MacLeod remembered it. Leachman was convinced that he actually tried to hit her. Fast forward to 1970, and the entire cast gathers for their first rehearsal dinner. And Leachman announces, "I'm not going to sit next to Gavin because he tried to hit me once." That's how she broke the ice. Not with small talk, but with a decade-old grudge delivered like a punchline at a dinner party. MacLeod later told the story with genuine warmth, less like a man describing a feud, and more like someone who understood exactly who Cloris Leachman was. He said of her, quote, "As an actress, Cloris could do anything." And that dynamic bled right into the show. Phyllis and Murray had the same slightly off, never quite on the same page energy. Knowing that backstory makes every one of their scenes feel like it's carrying just a little more weight. Hey, quick pause. If you ever tossed anything in the air and pretended you were Mary Richards, or you worked for a boss who was basically Lou Grant with less charm, you're our people. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest. And drop a comment. Which WJM character would you want sitting next to you in the newsroom? We want names. All right, back to the breaking news. Number 7, the episode where Mary asked the question that nobody was asking on TV. In the season 3 premiere, Mary Richards finds out that she's being paid $50 a week less than the man who had her job before her. In 1972, that's real money. So she walks into Lou Grant's office, and Lou doesn't deny it. His reasoning is pure 1970s workplace logic. The last guy made more because he had a family to support. He even admits that Mary's work is better. Doesn't matter. Family man gets the bigger check. Mary fires back that her work is the same. Her responsibilities are the same, so why isn't her paycheck? In 1972, you weren't seeing that conversation on TV. Women on television weren't confronting their bosses about money. That scene was years ahead of where the rest of the industry was willing to go. And it didn't come wrapped in a clean victory. Mary does get a raise, but only half of what she asked for. Gloria Steinem called it out directly, saying Mary, quote, agitated for equal pay and got half of what she asked for. It was a very pop cultural compromise. In that line, it stings a little. Behind the scenes, the show had one of the more progressive writers' rooms in the business. Treva Silverman and other female writers brought real-life experiences directly into the scripts. Silverman once stopped a rehearsal because Mary was scripted to say that she was going to, quote, wash up, pointing out that no woman would actually phrase it that way. Ed Asner later said that environment changed some of his own thinking off-screen. Number 6, the tiny newsroom that fooled everyone. The WJM Newsroom looked like a real functioning television station. Phones ringing, clocks on the wall, a visible broadcast booth just through the glass. It felt like a working operation with an entire staff just out of frame. None of that happened by accident. Set designers were working with a compact footprint and a tight budget, so every inch had to pull double duty. The main workspace was built around a couple of desks dressed with phones, a teletype machine, letter trays, and a Rolodex. The kind of layered clutter that signals people actually use this space rather than we built this Tuesday. The clock suggested a station tracking national coverage. The windowed wall looking into the broadcast studio implied a whole other world just beyond the set, one the cameras never had to actually show. Background movement was carefully choreographed to suggest a larger staff that didn't exist. It's a classic trick. You keep the edges of the frame active, and the audience, they fill in the rest. And then there's the newsroom's crown jewel, the assignment board. It listed real-sounding local stories, rotated regularly, and gave the whole space a sense of ongoing, authentic work. No single prop did more to sell WJM-TV as a real station than that board. And the call letters? Well, those came from the station owner, a character named Wild Jack Monroe. It's the kind of detail that sounds like a throwaway until you realize that it means the fictional station had a backstory built right into its sign. Set designers understood something important. Clutter, when done right, can tell a story. And for 7 seasons, every carefully placed coffee cup, stack of wire copy, and detail hiding in plain sight told the story of a newsroom that felt lived in, chaotic, and completely real. Number 5, the theme song that literally changed its mind. Love Is All Around was written in a single day. Songwriter Sonny Curtis, the man who wrote I Fought the Law and fronted Buddy Holly's Crickets, got a 4-page description of the show around noon and had the core verse finished by 2 p.m. He played it for James L. Brooks on that same afternoon. One day, start to finish. But the song changed because Mary changed. In season 1, the lyrics aren't sure about her. How will you make it on your own? This world is awfully big, girl. Even the payoff hedges. You might just make it after all. Might, not will? Well, after the first season, the producers called Curtis with the obvious note. She's made it. Update the song. So the lyrics flipped. Who can turn the world on with her smile? You're gonna make it after all. No hedging, no question mark. The theme went from wondering if she'd survive to declaring that she already had. Number 4, the Emmy streak that took a quarter century to beat. The Mary Tyler Moore Show won 29 Primetime Emmy Awards, 67 nominations, and for 25 years, no other sitcom could touch that number. The record stood until 2002, when Frasier edged past it with win number 30. Now, most shows peak in the middle and coast. This one won Outstanding Comedy Series 3 consecutive years to close it out, 75, 76, and 1977. The show walked off the stage still beating everything else on television, and the cast was individually dismantling the competition. Mary Tyler Moore won 3 Emmys for Mary Richards. Ed Asner won 3 for Lou Grant on this show alone, 7 total across his career, making him the most awarded male performer in Emmy history. Valerie Harper took 3 consecutive supporting actress wins and then added a 4th for lead actress on the Rhoda spinoff. Ted Knight picked up 2. Cloris Leachman won 2 for Phyllis, and Betty White took 1 home for Sue Ann Nivens. Before this show, half-hour comedy and prestige television didn't really live in the same sentence. And the cast that made the walk to the podium so often, the seat fillers, probably knew him by name. Number 3, the character that nobody wanted back until they did. Sue Ann Nivens was written as a 1-episode villain. The plan was simple. You bring in a character who was aggressively wholesome on camera and completely ruthless off of it, and let her clash with Mary for 22 minutes and then send her home. The script even described what they were looking for as an, quote, icky sweet Betty White type. So, well, they went ahead and they called up Betty White. And White came in. She played the happy homemaker with the serrated edge. And the moment that filming wrapped, James L. Brooks passed her a note. It read, quote, don't make too many plans. She was back the following season and the season after that, a one-time guest who became main cast by season 5 and appeared in 45 episodes before the show ended. Now here's what made Sue Ann work. White understood that the joke wasn't the meanness, it was the smile around the meanness. Sue Ann never dropped the cheerful domestic goddess routine, even while she was quietly dismantling everyone in the room. The contrast was the whole character. A lesser performer plays it as a villain. White played it as a woman who simply couldn't understand why everyone else wasn't as delightful as she was. Number 2, the actor who almost lost Lou Grant before creating him. Now, it's impossible to imagine anyone other than Ed Asner as Lou Grant. He owned that role so completely that it feels like he was born wearing a tie and holding that coffee mug. But he was almost never given the chance. And he wasn't the only one that they were considering. Jack Klugman, Gavin MacLeod, and Second City alum Shelley Berman were all in the mix before Asner's name came up. In 1970, Asner was a serious dramatic actor. Nothing in his resume said sitcom. It was Grant Tinker who put him in the room. He'd seen Asner play a comedic police chief and thought it was worth a shot. When producers Brooks and Burns asked casting director Ethel Wynant if Asner could handle comedy, her answer was simple. Ed Asner can do anything. He blew the first reading completely. He hit the spunk line with dramatic fervor that turned everybody off, playing it like a courtroom scene instead of a newsroom. Brooks told him it was a very intelligent reading, and Asner muttered, yeah, but was it funny? Brooks invited him back to read with more. The second reading changed everything. Suddenly, Lou Grant was layered, human, the kind of guy who'd chew you out for being late and then quietly cover for you when it mattered. Moore still wasn't sold. After Asner left the room, she turned to the producers and asked, are you sure? And they flat out told her, that's your Lou. And then he proved it with 6 words. You've got spunk. I hate spunk. Number 1, the show that secretly built The Simpsons. The Mary Tyler Moore Show ended in 1977. The Simpsons debuted almost 12 years later in 1989. One's a live-action newsroom comedy, and the other's an animated family in a town where nobody ages. On the surface, nothing's in common, except the guy who helped create both of them. James L. Brooks co-created The Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1970, and then walked away and did it again. Matt Groening created The Simpsons, and Brooks, along with Sam Simon, developed the concept into a series. The same creative mind behind the WJM Newsroom was helping build Springfield from the ground up. But Brooks carried more than instincts to Springfield. He carried his people. Julie Kavner got her start on the MTM spinoff Rhoda, playing Brenda, Rhoda's younger sister. The Brooks orbit pulled her in from there. She joined the cast of The Tracy Ullman Show and started voicing Marge in animated shorts, so when The Simpsons became its own series, Kavner came with it. The line from the MTM universe to Marge Simpson runs through a spin-off and a sketch show, but it starts in that world. Ed Asner and Valerie Harper both turned up in Springfield as guest voices. Sam Simon had come up through the Taxi writers' room, another Brooks co-creation. The whole operation had fingerprints from his earlier career all over it. One producer's career arc connects a Minneapolis newsroom to a little yellow family in Springfield. Not a blueprint, but more like a fingerprint. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about the Mary Tyler Moore Show that prove that the newsroom was just as wild behind the scenes as it was on camera. So which one caught you off guard? Drop it in the comments and tell us your favorite Mary Richards moment. We know you got one. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with whoever you used to watch Mary with. They probably need this trip back to Minneapolis just as much as you did. And until next time, you're gonna make it after all. This is Remember When.